The Galactic Council was the most powerful alliance in the known galaxy, a gathering of hundreds of intelligent species that had ruled the stars for thousands of years. Their grand chambers were made of crystal and gold, and every decision they made shaped the lives of billions. They believed themselves wise, fair, and united, but fear had begun to creep into their hearts. That fear had one name, and that name was humanity. When humans first appeared among the stars, they were seen as another young and ambitious race trying to survive. They were new, small, and unimportant in the beginning. But within a few generations, humanity did something no other species had done. They adapted faster than anyone thought possible. They learned the languages of the stars, studied every system, and made friends and allies where others made enemies. They could survive on frozen worlds, burning deserts, and radioactive moons. They turned every challenge into strength, and that frightened the old powers of the galaxy more than any army could. At first, the Council tried to control them through trade. They offered humans technology in exchange for resources, thinking it would keep them dependent. But humanity did not remain dependent for long. They studied every tool, every ship, every fragment of alien design until they could make their own. And theirs were better, faster, and cheaper. Within a century, human-built ships began to outnumber the Council in trade routes. Colonies under the human banner thrived where others had failed. Human merchants were everywhere, trading not with greed, but with a sense of curiosity that made other species trust them. That trust became influence, and that influence became power. The Council watched in silence, their pride stinging more each year. The oldest members whispered that humanity was growing too strong, that they must be stopped before it was too late. Meetings began in secret, away from the open chambers where the public could not hear. The Grand Hall of Vargath Prime, home of the Council, became a place of hidden fear. The leaders of great races sat behind closed doors and spoke in hushed voices about the human problem. They said humans were too aggressive, too unpredictable, too emotional. Some argued that humans brought balance and innovation to the galaxy, but those voices were quickly silenced by others who had seen human war footage. The memory of Earth's past wars frightened them more than human ships ever could. If a species capable of such destruction could now travel between stars, what would happen if they turned that fury toward others? They imagined entire worlds burning, fleets destroyed, empires falling in days. The fear grew until it became hatred disguised as caution. The Council decided that humanity must be contained. They started with small things. Trade restrictions were quietly introduced. Human colonies suddenly found that important supplies were delayed or denied. New tariffs made it expensive for humans to sell goods beyond their own borders. Diplomatic invitations stopped coming. When human ships requested docking rights on Council worlds, excuses were made about security concerns. The Council called these actions necessary steps to maintain balance, but everyone knew the truth. It was not balance they wanted, it was control. Humanity noticed the change but did not react immediately. They had seen such tactics before in their own history. Earth had been divided by fear and greed many times, and humanity had always found a way to survive. Instead of complaining, they began to prepare. On Earth, leaders gathered in silent meetings much like the Council's. They did not speak in panic. They spoke with cold focus. Humanity had learned from every civilization they met, and now they would use that knowledge. The Terran Defense Fleet began quiet expansion, building ships not for aggression, but for protection. They did not announce it to the galaxy. They simply worked in silence. Engineers designed new reactors, stronger shields, faster drives. They knew that if the Council truly feared them, war would eventually follow. Humanity's best minds began to think not of how to win a war, but how to survive one. Still, many humans hoped it would not come to that. Some believed the Council would see reason and end the restrictions. Ambassadors were sent to negotiate, but they were turned away with polite words and false smiles. One by one, the doors closed on humanity. It was then that the first real betrayal took place. A human diplomat named Arlen Tear was stationed on a Council world to discuss trade restoration. He was well respected and known for his peaceful manner. One night, the station where he was staying exploded. The Council claimed it was a reactor malfunction, but the humans found evidence that it was sabotage. The culprit was never found. That was the moment when Earth realized that peace was no longer possible. Across human space, people felt the shift. Colonies that had once trusted the Council began to arm themselves. Shipyards worked day and night, and intelligence networks expanded into Council territory. Humanity no longer asked for fairness. They only watched, waited, and prepared. What the Council did not understand was that humans did not see themselves as conquerors. They saw themselves as survivors. Every world they had colonized had taught them something new about endurance, adaptation, and unity. While the Council debated politics, humanity built resolve. In the Council's private meetings, the tone changed from worry to panic. Reports came in showing that despite all restrictions, human progress had not slowed. If anything, it had accelerated. Human research stations were developing technology that even the Council could not understand. The old powers began to whisper about a preemptive strike, something to cripple humanity before they became unstoppable. A few voices warned that such action would only guarantee war, but they were ignored. Fear had already made its choice. Plans were drawn in secret to surround human space, to cut off their colonies, and to strike military targets in one decisive blow. The Council believed it would end quickly, that humanity would surrender once they saw the strength of the united galaxy. They had no idea what they were about to awaken. While the Council plotted in shadows, the humans continued to listen. They had spies in unexpected places, merchants, traders, and even sympathetic aliens who had seen the injustice. Bit by bit, the humans gathered information until they knew almost everything about the Council's secret plan. The moment the full picture became clear, the Terran Command made its decision. Earth would not beg, Earth would not plead, and Earth would not wait to be attacked. They would prepare their worlds, protect their people, and issue one final warning to those who thought them weak. The day that message was drafted, a storm gathered over Earth's sky. Lightning flashed across the oceans, and rain struck the great cities as if the planet itself felt the tension. In the command center beneath the surface, the leaders of humanity stood together, their faces lit by holographic displays of the galaxy. No one spoke of revenge or anger. They spoke of survival, of family, of home. One of the generals said quietly that humanity had always given the galaxy a chance to be peaceful. But if that peace was betrayed, there would be no second warning. That night, a single coded transmission left Earth, traveling faster than light through quantum relays. It was sent to every Council world, every fleet commander, and every ambassador. The message was simple and cold. It said, "We know what you plan. Do not cross the border of human space. This is your first and last warning." The Council received the message and laughed. They believed humans were bluffing, that fear had made them cautious. They did not realize that behind that calm message was an entire civilization ready to fight for its existence. The seeds of betrayal had already been planted, but what would soon follow would shake the galaxy forever. Far away from Earth in the cold edge of human space, a small listening post orbited a dying red star. Its crew lived in silence, surrounded by darkness and metal. They spent their days watching the void, listening to the faint hum of distant signals and waiting for anything unusual. Most of the time, nothing happened, only the steady rhythm of machines and the quiet voices of tired humans. But one night, a young technician named Ryan saw something strange on the scanner. At first, he thought it was an error, a burst of static that would disappear. But when he focused, the signal grew stronger. It was a pattern of movements too organized to be natural, dozens, then hundreds of ships moving together across a sector that had always been empty. He called his commander, and within minutes, every officer on the station was awake staring at the same display. The data was clear, a massive fleet was gathering near the border of human space, and none of those ships carried human codes. The message was sent to Earth at once, and in less than an hour, it reached the Terran Defense Command. The High Council of Admirals and leaders met in the underground chamber beneath the capital city. Their faces were calm, but the room was heavy with quiet fear. They had seen the signs before: trade restrictions, the silence of the Galactic Council, the loss of the diplomat, and now a fleet so large, it could only mean one thing. They were preparing to strike. The oldest admiral spoke first, saying, "Humanity had hoped the Council would choose peace, but hope had limits. He looked at the others and said the words that no one wanted to hear the time, for talk was over. Now it was time to prepare for survival. Every shipyard, every station, and every colony would move to full alert. Orders were sent through encrypted channels to all human worlds. The message was simple: fortify your borders and trust. No.
On Mars, the great shipyards came alive. Their furnaces burned brighter than ever. Engineers and workers labored without rest. Ships that had been in storage for years were reactivated and refitted. Newer designs left the docks faster than ever before. Pilots who had retired were called back to duty, and young recruits lined up in thousands across every world. They knew that war was near, even if the Council had not declared it yet in the orbit. Above Earth, fleets moved into silent formation there, hulls reflecting the light of the sun like floating silver islands. Every ship was ready, every weapon charged, but no one wanted to fire. First, they remembered the message they had sent, the warning that said, "Do not cross the border of human space." Meanwhile, in the Council's Grand Hall, the representatives of the many species met in secrecy. Again, they believed humanity would not dare to resist. They thought the humans were bluffing, that their fleet was small compared to the combined strength of the galaxy. The Speaker of the Council stood before them and announced that the human warning was nothing more than empty pride. He said that humans were dangerous and must be taught obedience. Many agreed, but a few among them hesitated. One ambassador from a smaller race whispered that humans had always kept their word. Whether in peace or war, if they said they would defend themselves, they would do so to the last breath. But the larger empires ignored those words. They had forgotten what it meant to fight for survival. They had never lived on a world where the sky itself could kill them. They had never been forced to build their strength from nothing. So the vote passed, and the fleets were ordered to advance toward human territory under the false claim of patrol exercises. As the Council fleets gathered near the border, their presence did not go unnoticed across human space. Alarms rang in every command center. The scanners showed ships moving closer to forbidden zones. Earth did not respond with panic. It responded with silence and precision. Hidden satellites relayed data to every fleet command. Every ship moved to defensive positions without broadcasting signals. The void around human space began to change as if invisible. Hands were shaping it into a trap on the surface of Luna. Soldiers trained in the deep tunnels, preparing for any possible invasion. Civilian ships were quietly evacuated from outer colonies and sent deeper into human space. Still, humanity did not strike. They waited, watching every move of the approaching armada. On the frontier world of Kepler 9, the people could see strange lights in the sky far away, like stars that moved in formation. The local governor sent urgent reports back to Earth, saying that alien fleets were now within visual range. Earth Command replied with one simple order: maintain calm, prepare shelters, and trust the defense grid. The people obeyed, for they had faith in their fleet. They had seen what their engineers could build. They knew that if war came, humanity would not fall easily. Still, the fear spread through the colonies. Families gathered in their homes, listening to the quiet hum of news channels that repeated the same message again and again: remain calm, the situation is under control. Deep in the command chambers of the Terran Defense Fleet, the Admiral studied the reports, his face expressionless as the data scrolled across the holographic screens. He knew that the Council had already decided their course. He could see the pattern of their movement. It was a classic encirclement maneuver, the same tactic humans themselves had once used on Earth. Centuries ago, he almost smiled at the irony. They thought they could corner humanity, as if humans were still the weak newcomers of 100 years ago. But they had no idea what had changed. The Admiral gave the order to activate the Ghost Network, a secret array of stealth drones spread across the stars that could track every enemy movement. Without being detected, the network came online, and soon the humans knew the exact position and speed of every Council fleet. In the following days, the tension grew unbearable across the galaxy. Merchants reported sudden restrictions, military convoys vanished from communication, and rumors spread that the Council was preparing to deliver a final demand to Earth. In the Council's private chamber, the Speaker drafted the message. It accused humanity of destabilizing galactic unity and demanded immediate disarmament. Failure to comply would be treated as an act of war. The message was sent across subspace and delivered to Earth within minutes. Every leader of human space received it at once. There was no debate and no delay. The response was prepared and sent in return. It said, "We will not disarm, we will not submit. We seek peace, but we will defend our home if you cross our border. You will not return." The council received the message, and for a moment silence filled the great chamber. Some of the younger ambassadors looked uncertain. The older ones laughed. They believed it was a bluff. They believed their combined power was unstoppable, and so they gave the order for the fleets to move forward. The engines of thousands of warships ignited, filling the void with their light as they crossed into human space. Their admirals smiled, thinking that soon the humans would surrender without resistance. They were wrong. In the shadows of asteroids and moons, human ships waited their weapons, powered down their signatures, masked by advanced cloaking fields. No alien had ever seen such technology before. They thought the humans were defenseless. But the truth was that every inch of space they were entering had already been mapped, prepared, and armed as the enemy fleets advanced deeper into the border zone. The humans observed every move from command centers on Earth, Mars, and Titan. Data streamed through the Ghost network, updating positions by the second. Every commander waited for the final order, but it did not come. Not yet. The humans were patient. They wanted the council to reveal its full strength before they acted on Earth. The admiral stood before the central display, his hands clasped behind his back. He knew that once the first shot was fired, there would be no going back. But he also knew that this war was not one humanity had chosen. It was forced upon them by fear and arrogance. As he watched the enemy symbols glowing red across the star map, he whispered a quiet promise that humanity would endure no matter the cost. By the time the council realized how deep they had entered human territory, it was already too late. Their scanners failed to detect the hidden mines, the decoy signals, and the dormant defense. Satellites waiting to awaken the void seemed silent and empty, but it was an illusion. A massive trap built over years under the cover of peace. While the council boasted and debated, humanity had been preparing for this moment. Every engineer, every soldier, and every scientist had worked together, knowing that one day they might need to protect everything they had built. As the fleets of the council continued to advance, humanity stood ready. The storm had not yet broken, but everyone in the galaxy could feel it coming. And when it did, the stars themselves would remember the day the council crossed the border and awakened the wrath of Earth. The fleets of the Galactic Council moved slowly across the border into human space, their ships stretched across the stars like a dark wave swallowing the light. Every vessel carried soldiers and weapons ready for war. They believed it would be quick and simple. They believed humanity would kneel and surrender, but the void remained silent. No human ships appeared to challenge them, and no transmissions came from Earth. The commanders of the council fleets thought it was fear that kept the humans quiet, but they did not understand that it was something else. It was patience, the same patience that had carried humanity through centuries of struggle and survival. They waited for the right moment, because they knew that once the first shot was fired, there would be no turning back. Far from Earth, on a small station hidden within the rings of a gas giant, a human intelligence team watched the invasion unfold. Their scanners tracked every ship, every movement, every small signal. The officer in charge, a quiet man named Hal, watched the screens with steady eyes. His crew asked if they should warn the colonies, but he shook his head, saying not yet, they must come deeper. He knew the council's plan. He had studied their patterns, and he knew they would not stop at the border. They wanted to strike at the heart of human civilization. They wanted Earth itself. The reports he sent back to Terran Command were short but clear. The enemy was advancing and would soon reach the outer colonies on Earth. The command center beneath the surface buzzed with silent activity. Every wall was covered in holographic projections showing the fleets moving closer. The admiral stood before the largest display, his face calm but his mind sharp with calculation. He gave quiet orders, and the fleet commanders across the system listened carefully. Every ship was to hold position and remain hidden. Under no condition were they to engage. First, the humans would let the council show its full strength. First, then, when the time came, the sky itself would turn against them. Across the colony's preparations continued. Every mining outpost became a fortress. Every transport ship was secretly armed, and every satellite became a piece of the hidden defense grid. Humanity had turned its entire territory into one vast living trap as the Council fleets moved. Deeper, they began to split into groups, each targeting a different sector. One fleet approached Mars, another moved toward the asteroid belt, and a third made its way directly toward Earth. They still saw no resistance. They sent scouting ships forward. But many of those scouts never returned. The commanders thought it was interference or mechanical failure. They did not know that those scouts had been destroyed silently by human drones so small and fast that no radar could see them even. The most advanced alien sensors could not detect the network of cloaked devices that now surrounded them. In the halls of the Council on Vargath Prime, messages from the front lines arrived every hour. The Speaker of the Council smiled as he read the reports. There was no sign of human resistance. He told the others that humanity was weaker than they had thought. He said that soon they would have complete control of human space, and that the galaxy would be safe again. But deep down, some of the younger members of the Council began to feel uneasy. The reports were too perfect, the silence too complete. There should have been resistance, at least on the outer colonies. One of them whispered that it was like walking into a fog, not knowing what waited on the other side, but their warnings were ignored. The decision had already been made. Back on Mars, the sky glowed red as workers rushed to finish the final parts of the defense network. Underground, cities were sealed and the population was moved to safe zones. The sound of engines filled the tunnels as fighter squadrons took off one after another. They rose through the dust and disappeared into the upper atmosphere, where they waited motionless, behind magnetic shields. They could not be seen by any sensor from the outside above them in orbit. Massive stations powered up their weapons quietly. The system was ready, but still no order to attack came from Earth. The commanders waited because they trusted that the time had not yet come. On the outer edge of the solar system near the orbit of Neptune, a small fleet of human scouts detected. The lead Council ships approaching their sensors showed hundreds of cruisers and battleships armed with weapons of unimaginable power. The humans did not retreat. Instead, they shut down their systems and drifted silently, pretending to be debris. When the Council fleet passed by, the human scouts began transmitting coordinates back to command, feeding the network with precise locations. Within minutes, every human ship in the system knew exactly where the enemy was. The data was transmitted through quantum relays faster than light and reached Earth instantly. The Admiral looked at the numbers and knew that the invasion was now fully committed. In the quiet hours before dawn on Earth, the Admiral walked through the observation deck high above the planet. He looked down at the oceans and the cities glowing softly beneath the clouds. He thought of all the lives below, men, women, and children who had no idea that the greatest fleet in the galaxy was moving toward them. He thought of how far humanity had come from the first step on the moon to the colonies on distant stars, and he felt a calm certainty that they would endure. He returned to the command chamber and gave one simple order: prepare to engage. As the order spread through the network, every human ship powered up its systems silently across the solar system. Reactors came online and shields hummed with life. The stars that had seemed calm began to flicker with strange light. The enemy fleet still advanced, unaware that death waited for them. The first Council fleet entered the asteroid belt and began clearing a path with their weapons. They thought they were destroying debris, but the rocks they fired on were not rocks at all. Many were hidden missile platforms and mines planted long ago. When the first explosions lit the darkness, the Council ship slowed, unsure of what was happening. Then from behind the asteroids came the first wave of human ships. Their engines burned blue as they fired from the shadows. The battle had begun. The Council fleet tried to respond, but their communication systems were jammed. Every signal they sent was lost. In static, they could not see their enemy because the human ships moved like ghosts. Their cloaking systems flickered on and off, confusing the alien scanners. Missiles streaked through the void, hitting targets with perfect precision. The Council ships tried to regroup, but every time they formed ranks, another attack came from a different direction. It was chaos. In minutes, dozens of ships were destroyed, their debris floating silently in the dark. The humans did not broadcast messages or demands. They fought in silence, cold and precise, as if the machines themselves had taken command. When the first reports reached the Council homeworld, the Speaker's smile vanished. He demanded answers, but none came. The communication lines were filled with panic voices shouting over one another. The fleets were under attack, but they did not know from where the speaker ordered more ships to be sent. But by then it was too late, the trap had already closed. The second fleet near Mars tried to retreat but found every route blocked by magnetic storms and energy barriers generated by human satellites. Their ships struggled to move, while human bombers appeared from nowhere, striking their engines and fuel tanks one by one. The mighty fleets of the Council began to break apart on Mars. The sky burned as streaks of light crossed the horizon. The people in the shelters watched in silence, their faces pale as they felt the ground tremble above them. The human ships fought with discipline, every strike calculated, every move precise. They had trained for this moment for years. And now their training showed. While the Council's forces were larger in number, the humans fought with purpose. They were defending their home, their families, their world, and that gave them a strength that no technology could match in the darkness of space near Earth's moon. The largest human warship waited. It was called the Aegis, and it was the pride of the Terran fleet. Its hull was made of reinforced alloy, its engines powered by a core that could burn for centuries. It had been built in secret, far from prying eyes. Now it moved silently into position. Its weapons charged, its crew ready when the signal came from command. The ship unleashed its power beams of light brighter than the sun tore through the enemy lines. Ships exploded in every direction as the Aegis led the counterattack. The tide of the battle turned completely. The Council fleets that had entered human space with such confidence were now trapped, surrounded, and falling apart. As the battle raged across the system, Earth remained calm. Its people were safe underground, listening to the distant rumble of war above them. They did not know the details. They only knew that their defenders were fighting and that humanity would not fall again in the command chamber. The Admiral watched as the enemy symbols on the screen vanished one after another. He said nothing. He only stood with his hands behind his back as the greatest fleets in the galaxy were erased in silence outside in the blackness of space. The wreckage drifted slowly, glowing with the last heat of battle. The war that the Council had begun had now truly arrived, and humanity was ready to finish what had been forced upon them. The day that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The stars themselves seemed to hold their breath as the smoke of destroyed fleets drifted through the void. Broken ships floated silently, the remains of proud armadas that had once been the symbol of the Council's power across human space. The silence was deep and strange. It was the silence that comes after something terrible and final. The humans did not cheer. They did not broadcast victory messages. They simply repaired their ships, tended to their wounded, and waited because they knew the war was not over. Yet it was only beginning in the great command chamber under Earth. The Admiral stood surrounded by maps and data, his eyes watching the red symbols of enemy fleets still active across the galaxy. They were regrouping, forming new lines, preparing for another strike. He knew they would not stop after the first defeat. Pride and arrogance would not let them. He turned to his officers and gave the next order: prepare the second line of defense. Across Mars and Titan, factories worked without rest, building weapons and armor. The hum of machines filled every colony as humans of every rank and background worked side by side. Soldiers trained in the cold hangars, pilots studied enemy tactics, and engineers tested new devices designed to disrupt Council communications. They worked not for glory, but for survival. They knew that the Council had underestimated them once and paid a heavy price. But they also knew that the Council had resources far greater than theirs: more fleets, more soldiers, more allies. The only way humanity could win was by being smarter, faster, and united. There was no room for error. Far away on Vargath, Prime, the Council was in chaos. The great hall that had once been filled with calm voices and confident speeches now echoed with arguments and fear. The Speaker of the Council demanded to know how the fleets had been destroyed so easily. But no one had answers. Some shouted that the humans must have had outside help. Others accused the commanders of incompetence. One of the ambassadors, a frail creature from a desert world, stood and said quietly that the humans had done nothing more than defend themselves, and that it was the Council's arrogance that had led to this defeat. But his voice was drowned out by anger and pride. The older leaders refused to accept that a young species could defeat them. They ordered the mobilization of every available ship across the Allied worlds. Billions of credits worth of resources were poured into new weapons and experimental systems. They swore that this time the humans would be crushed once and for all. On the human side, messages of the Council's regrouping were intercepted by the Ghost Network, the same invisible system that had warned them before the Admiral read the reports and felt no fear, only determination. He knew the Council would return, and he knew they would come with everything they had. He gathered his senior officers and told them that the next battle would not be fought only with weapons. It would be fought with ideas and strategies. The humans could not afford to meet the enemy head on. They would have to strike from the shadows using the same cunning that had helped them survive through centuries of hardship. He divided the fleets into small task groups, each assigned to a sector. Each given freedom to act independently, trusted his commanders because he knew that every one of them understood what was at stake. In the months that followed, the war spread beyond the borders of human space. Council fleets attacked smaller colonies and trade routes, hoping to starve humanity into surrender. But wherever they went, human ships appeared out of nowhere, hitting them hard and disappearing before they could retaliate. The Council called them ghosts. Some believed the humans had discovered new forms of stealth. Others thought they had allies in unknown regions, but the truth was simple. The humans had mastered deception. They used decoys, false transmissions, and hidden relays to make their enemies chase shadows. And when the Council tried to regroup, their fleets were scattered across vast distances, unable to communicate properly. Frustration grew among their commanders, who began to question their leaders' decisions. On the colony world of Europa, a group of scientists worked on something that would change the course of the war. They were developing a system called Echo Pulse, a weapon not meant to destroy ships but to turn their technology against them. It could overload communication arrays and power systems, causing enemy ships to shut down without firing a shot. The scientists worked in secret, knowing that if they succeeded, it could give humanity an advantage that even numbers could not defeat. When the first test was completed, a single pulse was sent through the void toward an old, decommissioned ship. The lights of the ship flickered and died instantly. The system shut down completely. It worked. News of the success was sent to Earth, and production began immediately. The humans would not just defend. They would disrupt and disarm back on Vargath. The Council's scientists were also working. They created a weapon of their own, a massive ship larger than any before it, armed with energy cannons that could vaporize entire cities. In a single strike, they called it the Sovereign. It was built in secret under the surface of a dead moon, guarded by fleets and protected by secrecy. When it was complete, it would be sent to lead the assault on Earth, but spies hidden among the workers sent word to humanity before it could leave the dock. The message reached Earth Command within hours, and the Admiral made his decision. The Sovereign could not be allowed to reach human space at any cost. He ordered a covert strike team to destroy it before it launched. A group of stealth ships, left from Titan, their mission known only to a few. They traveled through empty space, hiding between gravity shadows and asteroid fields. The journey took weeks, but they finally reached the dead moon where the Sovereign was being built. From afar, it looked like a small star glowing faintly against the black void, its surface alive with activity. The human ships released a wave of micro-drones that slipped through the defenses unnoticed. They carried small warheads, each aimed at critical points. Deep inside the construction site, the team waited for the signal from command. Then, as one, they activated the charges. The explosion was silent, but immense. A burst of light that spread across the dark sky. The Sovereign never launched. Its remains drifted across the stars as debris. When the news reached the Council, the Speaker smashed his desk in rage. He called the humans monsters, but even he knew deep down that the humans had only done what they had to do. The destruction of the Sovereign marked a turning point. The Council's allies began to doubt their leadership. Some smaller species began to secretly withdraw their fleets. Others sent quiet messages to Earth asking for peace or neutrality. They no longer saw humanity as a threat. They saw them as survivors, strong and relentless, who fought only when forced to. While the Council tried to rebuild its strength, humanity used the moment to strengthen its defenses even more. The colonies that had been damaged were rebuilt and fortified. The fleets that had fought at Mars and the asteroid belt were repaired and upgraded. Every pilot, Every soldier, every engineer knew that the war was far from over. But they also knew they had already achieved what no one thought possible. They had faced the might of the galaxy and survived one evening. As the sun set over the blue oceans of Earth, the Admiral stood on the surface for the first time in months. The air was clean and the sky peaceful. He watched children playing near the water. And for a brief moment he felt hope. He knew that this peace might not last, but he also knew that humanity had earned its place among the stars not by conquest but by endurance. He returned to his ship that night and gave one final order. To his fleet, remain ready. But do not strike first. If they come again, we will finish it. The human fleets waited silent as ever in the darkness of space. While far away the Council gathered its broken pride, preparing for another attempt. Neither side spoke, but both knew the next battle would decide the fate of the galaxy forever. The months passed slowly as the stars watched in silence. Fleets moved quietly through the darkness, carrying fear and determination on both sides. The humans waited, behind their hidden defenses, ready for what they knew was coming. While the Galactic Council prepared for their greatest push, every world under their command was ordered to contribute ships, weapons, and soldiers. Even those who doubted their leaders had no choice. The fear of humanity had become a shadow over every Council world. Stories of their cunning spread like wildfire, and the name of Earth became something spoken with both hate and respect. The Council had lost its pride, but not its hunger for control, and now they wanted revenge. They called it the Final Purge, a plan to strike at the very heart of humanity and erase their existence from the stars once and for all. In the command center on Earth, the Admiral stood looking at the holographic projection of the galaxy. His face calm but his eyes cold. The reports showed massive fleet movements near the outer systems, far larger than before. They were forming a wall of destruction stretching across several sectors. He knew this was it. The final push. The Council would not stop this time until either side was gone forever. He called his senior officers to the room and said only one sentence: "The storm is coming, and we will meet it head-on." The officers nodded without a word. They knew what that meant. Every colony, every ship, and every soldier would be called to fight. Humanity would stand together or fall together. Across the solar system, the preparation began on Mars. Shipyards blazed with light as the last wave of carriers and cruisers left their docks. The workers cheered as each one rose into the sky, knowing that every ship carried the hope of millions. On Titan and Europa defense stations powered up their shields and railguns, ready for the first sign of enemy presence on Earth. Civilians were moved to underground shelters, while soldiers lined the orbital stations. The hum of engines filled the night sky as hundreds of ships rose from the surface and disappeared into the black void. They were not an army of conquest. They were defenders of their home. Each man and woman on those ships knew they might not return, but none hesitated because they all remembered what had been done. The betrayal, the broken peace, the countless deaths, and the arrogance of those who thought humans were lesser beings. Far away, the Council fleets were gathering near the edge of known space. The Sovereign's destruction still haunted their commanders. So this time, they chose not to rely on a single weapon. Instead, they formed a swarm, an endless tide of warships meant to overwhelm anything in their path. The command ship at the center of the armada was led by High Lord Sarath. A being of immense power and ambition, he had studied every human battle and believed he had found their weakness. He thought humans were too dependent on strategy, too predictable when cornered. He planned to crush them fast before they could adapt around him. Thousands of ships shimmered in the void, ready to jump. Sarath raised his hand and gave the order, "Begin the final assault." Moments later, the stars near human space lit up as the enemy fleet appeared out of the void. They came in waves, their engines glowing like red suns. Thousands of vessels advanced through the empty space toward the human defenses, but they found nothing empty. Silence filled the scanners. No human ships, no stations, nothing. Sarath ordered his fleet to advance further still. Nothing. Then as they reached the asteroid belt, the trap closed. Around them, from behind the rocks, massive railguns hidden deep in the asteroids came alive, launching heavy rounds that tore through the first lines of enemy ships. Then from the darkness behind the enemy came the human fleets, moving with perfect precision. The void turned into chaos as the first shots of the final war began. The battle raged for hours and then days. The Council's numbers were immense, but the humans had the advantage of terrain and preparation their ships moved through, hidden channels and ambushed the enemy at every turn. The Echo Pulse weapon was unleashed for the first time across an entire sector, and hundreds of Council ships shut down instantly, drifting helplessly as human cruisers moved in to finish them. The stars burned bright with explosions as metal and fire filled the void, but even with their losses, the Council kept advancing. They poured more ships into the fight, wave after wave, like a storm that would not end. Sarath's command ship moved forward through the wreckage, directing the fleets personally. His eyes locked on the blue dot in the distance Earth. He wanted to reach it and end the war himself. On the human side, the Admiral watched as the Council fleets kept pushing through the defenses. He knew they could not hold forever. He ordered the fleets to fall back in stages to draw the enemy deeper, into the inner systems where more traps waited. Each retreat was painful. Every lost ship felt like a wound. But every time the enemy advanced, they paid dearly by the time they reached Jupiter. Half of their forces were gone. But Sarath did not stop. He pushed harder. Believing victory was close, his pride would not let him see the danger ahead near the orbit of Mars. The humans prepared their final stand. Massive cannons hidden beneath the planet's surface were activated. The sky of Mars turned. Red as plasma fire streaked upward, meeting the enemy fleets head-on. For every human ship destroyed, 2 Council ships fell, but still the tide came forward. Finally, Sarath's armada reached the orbit of Earth. The blue planet hung in the distance. Calm and untouched, it looked so small, yet it had brought the greatest powers of the galaxy to their knees. Sarath stood on the bridge of his ship and smiled. He ordered all cannons to target the planet. But before they could fire, the stars shifted. A shadow appeared behind the Council fleet. It was the hidden human supercarrier, the same one that had remained silent since the beginning of the war. Its name was Horizon, and it carried the most powerful energy weapon ever built by humanity. The ship emerged from stealth like a ghost, its massive frame blocking out the light of nearby stars for a moment. Even Sarath was frozen. The humans had saved their greatest weapon for the end. The Horizon charged its weapon, the energy gathering at its core glowing brighter than the sun. Sarath screamed for his ships to fire, but it was too late. The beam erupted in a silent flash, slicing through the center of the Council. Armada, the light tore through ship after ship, cutting them apart before they could react. The explosion spread across the void, sending shockwaves through the debris fields. The command ship shook violently, alarms blaring. Sarath tried to steady himself, but the heat and force ripped through his hull. The bridge cracked, and for the first time he felt fear as his ship began to break apart. He watched through the glass as the blue light of Earth shimmered in the distance. The light grew brighter, and then everything faded into silence. When the fire cleared, there was nothing left of the Council's main fleet, only scattered wreckage and drifting fragments. The humans had done the impossible again. They had faced a force 10 times their size and survived, but the cost was great. Hundreds of ships were lost and thousands of lives gone across the command network. There was no cheering, only quiet voices calling names that would never answer. The Admiral stood on the bridge of his ship looking at the destruction, his heart heavy. He knew this victory was not glory. It was survival, pure and painful survival. He ordered rescue teams to search for survivors even among the enemy, because despite everything, they were still beings of the same stars. Back on Earth, the people waited in fear. The sky had been filled with strange lights and thunder as the battle raged above. When the signals finally came through and the Admiral announced the victory, the world fell silent for a moment. Then cheers began to rise across every city. People cried and embraced one another. They knew how close they had come to the end. But humanity had stood its ground again in the great Council chamber on Vargath Prime. The few surviving leaders sat in shock, their fleets gone, their power broken. They realized too late that their arrogance had destroyed them. One of them whispered the words that would be remembered across history. We should have listened. Humanity had warned us. In the following days, messages of surrender and peace came from several worlds. The Council was no longer a single power, but a fractured memory of what it once was. Humanity did not seek revenge. Instead, they sent a message across the stars to every world that could hear them. We will not attack. We will not conquer. But if you come for us again, we will end you. The words echoed across the galaxy, and none dared to answer. The humans had proved their strength, not through domination, but through endurance and unity. As the fleets began to return home, the stars were quiet once more. The admiral stood before his people and looked toward the sky, knowing that peace might not last forever, but this time, the galaxy would remember the cost of arrogance forever. The war was over, but the galaxy did not know peace. The stars were quiet, yet heavy with the memory of fire and destruction. The wreckage of countless ships floated through the void, broken metal and silent echoes of what once was. The humans had won, but they did not celebrate. They mourned their dead and repaired their homes in silence across human space. Signals of rebuilding filled the communication lines. Colonies that had gone dark during the war began to speak again. Ships carrying supplies moved from one world to another, guided by the same determination that had kept humanity alive for so long. The admiral who had led them through the final battle stood on the command deck of his ship, looking out at the stars. He saw not victory but responsibility. Humanity had survived the impossible, but survival came with a price. Now they carried the weight of their power and the fear it had created. Far from Earth, the remains of the Galactic Council struggled to find order. The great hall of Vargath Prime, once filled with pride and speeches, now stood almost empty. Many species had left the Alliance, some out of shame, others out of fear. The few that remained sat in silence as messages arrived from their colonies reporting loss after loss. Their fleets gone, their stations destroyed, their economies broken. One of the remaining counselors, an elder being named Tareen, spoke quietly and said, "We built a cage for a creature we did not understand, and now we are the ones trapped in it." No one answered him because they all knew he was right. Humanity had become something beyond their control, something too powerful to challenge and too dangerous to provoke. On Earth, the world was still healing. The cities that had been silent during the war came alive again. Factories started working, schools reopened, and people returned to their homes. But everyone carried the same unspoken memory of what they had survived. There were no parades, no fireworks, only a quiet pride that came from endurance. Every family had lost someone. Every street had a story of courage and sacrifice. The soldiers who returned were not treated as heroes but as protectors. They were thanked not for glory, but for standing between humanity and extinction. The admiral walked among them one day and spoke to a small group of young cadets training near the ocean. He told them, "We did not fight to destroy. We fought to remind the galaxy that we exist and that our freedom has a cost." They listened in silence, their faces serious, because even they who had grown up in peace could feel the weight of his words. While the humans rebuilt, the galaxy watched from afar. Rumors spread across the stars about Earth's new technologies, about the massive supercarrier that had appeared in the final battle and vanished again. Some said it was destroyed. Others claimed it still waited hidden among the stars, ready to strike at any who dared to threaten humanity again. Traders whispered that human ships had been seen helping damaged vessels of other species, giving food and aid, then disappearing without a trace. Some called it mercy. Others called it strategy. No one knew for sure what humanity planned next, but all agreed on one thing: the humans no longer needed to prove their strength. The galaxy already understood it. In the ruins of the old council archives, a small group of scholars began collecting records of the war. They studied human messages, strategies, and battles, trying to understand how a species so young could defeat powers that had ruled for thousands of years. They discovered that humans did not fight for conquest or pride. They fought for each other, for families, for homes, and for the idea of unity that most species had forgotten. One of the scholars wrote in his final report, "Humans are not the most powerful because of their weapons. They are powerful because they remember what pain feels like, and they never want to feel it again." The report was later hidden because even knowledge of such truth was seen as dangerous. The years passed, and slowly the galaxy began to change without the Council's control. Smaller alliances formed. Many worlds that had once served the Council turned toward humanity, seeking trade and guidance. But humanity was cautious. They accepted peace, but never trust. They remembered the betrayal too clearly. Every treaty was written with care, every agreement backed by strength. Their diplomats were polite, but their fleets always nearby. The admiral who had once led the war now led the new Terran alliance, a union of human colonies and a few alien worlds that believed in peace through respect. Not fear. They did not expand through conquest. They expanded through example by showing others that survival did not require domination. On the outer edges of known space, there were still some who wanted revenge. Small fleets of ex-council warlords gathered in the dark, hoping to strike back one day. But each time they tried, human patrols found them before they could act. The new human intelligence network reached far across the stars, quiet and unseen. The admiral had ordered that no war should begin again, but that no threat should ever be allowed to grow in silence. He understood that peace was fragile and that fear could easily turn to hate again. He often said peace is not given, it is guarded, and every soldier understood that. One night, as the admiral stood on the balcony of the rebuilt Earth Command, he looked up at the sky filled with thousands of stars. He thought of those who had died, and those who would live because of them. He knew that humanity had changed forever. They were no longer just another species. They had become a symbol of what happened when the weak refused to stay weak. He felt both pride and sorrow. Pride for what they had achieved, sorrow for what they had lost in the distance. The horizon, the great supercarrier that had vanished after the battle, reappeared. It entered orbit around Earth, its massive hull reflecting the light of the sun. It was damaged but still alive, a monument to human endurance. The admiral smiled faintly when he saw it. It was a sign that even after all the destruction, hope had survived. Messages began to come from distant worlds offering friendship and alliances. Small delegations arrived on Earth bringing gifts and apologies. One of the envoys from a reptilian species bowed deeply before the admiral and said, "We feared you because we did not understand you. Now we wish to learn from you." The admiral nodded and replied, "Understanding is the first step toward peace." The envoy left with those words, and soon stories began to spread. That the humans were building something new, not a weapon but a place, a council of their own, one that would not rule by fear, but by respect. It would be called the Assembly of Free Worlds, and every species would be welcome to join, so long as they honored peace and freedom. Decades later, the assembly stood in orbit above Mars in a great station, built by human and alien hands together. Its halls were filled with voices from dozens of species, and at the center hung a flag showing a single blue star surrounded by many smaller ones. It was the symbol of unity born from war. At the opening ceremony, an elderly admiral walked slowly to the podium and spoke, his voice steady and calm. He said, "Once there was betrayal. Once there was fear and hatred. But from it came understanding. We do not forget the past, but we do not live in it. We move forward together as one." The crowd was silent for a long moment before the hall filled with applause. It was not the applause of victory, but of hope. When the admiral returned to Earth, for the last time he visited the memorial built for those who had fallen during the war. Thousands of names were engraved in silver on black stone stretching across the field. He stood there for hours reading the names in silence. The wind moved gently across the grass and the sound of the ocean came from nearby. He placed his hand on the stone and whispered, "They will remember, the message is clear." Then he turned and walked away toward the sunset, knowing that his work was done. Humanity had left its mark not as conquerors but as survivors. The galaxy had seen their strength and their mercy, and now it would decide its own path far above the planet. The stars watched as they always had, silent witnesses to the story of a species that rose from dust to defend its place among them. The great ships drifted quietly through the void, their lights flickering like distant fireflies, carrying the promise of peace. The galaxy would never forget the day. Humanity stood alone against betrayal, and survived, and somewhere in that endless night a faint transmission continued to echo through the old channels, a simple message that had ended the greatest war in history, and now served as a warning and a reminder to all who heard it escape. Now and never betray the children of Earth again.